All right, should be just about now. I think we are on there. We are. I want to welcome everybody. It's Wednesday night. Y'all know what that means. It is another edition of Conversations with Cougars. And I am so pleased to have Brent Gilbert with me as my guest this evening. We've had a good chat before we came on live. And Brent, I'm so glad to see you and looking forward to our run through memory lane here for a few minutes.
I'm happy to be here.
And Brent, for folks who don't know, are you in Houston County or Dothan? Is that where you reside?
I am. I live in Dothan. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, catch up, folks, before we dive back into the past. Tell folks a little bit about your family and your professional life and things like that, and then we'll go back in time.
Okay. I got married right after college and came back to Dothan, and so I married Robbie Ann Borland. We're married today. We have 4 kids. One of my oldest daughter is now a doctor, and she is working at the medical center here in Dothan. My middle daughter is has just moved to Salt Lake City, and is in dental school there. So she's starting dental school. And I have twin boys that were the caboose. They are just starting their freshman year at Auburn University. So I've got youngins everywhere. I got my degree in criminal justice and started in law enforcement right out of school, but my dad owned a business and went to work for him. So I kind of had to make a decision, and I decided to kind of make law enforcement a hobby and work with my dad for a living. So I worked with him for several years, ended up buying his company, and it's a company that sells graduation supplies. It's called Herff Jones Company, and we do caps and gowns and class rings and championship rings, all that kind of stuff all over the state. So that's what I do for a living, but I've been involved in law enforcement ever since I graduated from college. So I've been in Dothan the whole time, and had a wonderful life here. And Dothan's a great place, and we've really enjoyed raising our family here. And kids are doing great. And like I said, actually last night was the first night that me and my wife looked at each other and went, well, we're empty nesters. Everybody's gone. So
wow.
Yeah. Wow. The boys went up. We moved them up to Auburn Monday.
Very good. Well, I know Robbie Ann went to Northview. Was she the same class as you?
No, Robbie Ann went to Houston Academy.
I thought she went to Northview.
Yeah, she had a sister that was my age that went to Northview.
Okay.
And went to Houston Academy, and she is 4 years younger than me. We actually met at Auburn, got put on a blind date. So I did not know her, knew her family, knew her sister, but we matched up on a blind date at Auburn. So blind dates do work sometimes.
Well, I was going to say, it sounded like this one worked out just fine. That's all. I got to ask.
At least for me, it did.
Your twin sons who just graduated this past year, where did they go to high school, or where did they finish up?
They went to Northside Methodist Academy, which is where my wife is a principal. So we had a good tight rein on them for 12 long years with her being principal there. But yeah, they both played football. Great kids, make good grades, a lot better than their daddy, a lot smarter than their daddy too. So they're going to do well. I'm looking forward to seeing what they do in the future.
Now, did either of them wear 59 or 62 in honor of their pops?
Actually, they did. In their senior year, it just happened. One of them wore 62 and the other one wore 59.
Oh, how cool.
Yeah. Cool. And it just happened by accident. It really did. It just kind of bizarre, but it happened.
Oh, that must have been a great feeling. But I got to say this, Brent, if folks on either the 81 squad for Northview or the 85 squad, if they've lost their state championship ring, can they get in touch with you? Is there a chance they can have them replaced?
I make them all the time. Every year I'll do one. One from one of these two teams I do just about every year. So yeah, Herff Jones keeps those dies, and we do them all the time.
Now, I've heard stories on our shows where guys they've earned their money for their state championship ring. They've raked up yards. They've painted barns. Now, will you take labor in kind, or has it got to be cash now?
Oh, no. Yeah, well, now, depending on how good of a worker they are, I'll make them work.
That's awesome.
We'll figure something out.
Oh, Brent, we got a whole bunch of folks who've rolled in, and you're going to recognize some of these names. So I want to give some shout outs to let you know who's
okay.
We got some guys you may recognize. Mark Kingery.
Yeah.
Cobb. Marquez White, Joseph Johnson, Charles Bronson, Mark Reeves, Coach Jerry Andrews, Cece Dixon, Karen McGinnis McGorry, and Shirley C.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Awesome.
And Miss C also says to remind you that Robbie Ann also taught at Northview.
Yes, she did. She did. Her first teaching job was at Northview. She taught Spanish.
Excellent. Excellent.
Never had Spanish before. She's an English teacher.
Got to do what you got to do. But
Yeah.
I want to thank everybody so far who've rolled in. Of course, I'm talking with Brent Gilbert, one of the stalwarts on that 81 team. And then he went on to Auburn, and we'll talk about all that. But before we get into those days, Brent, where were you born? Where'd you grow up? What neighborhood? Where'd you go to junior high? Take us up through, say, about 8th grade for you.
Well, I'm a Dothan guy forever. I was born here in Dothan. Was raised on when I was little, we moved. My dad built a house which was out in the country back then, which was on Meadowbrook, which is right on the circle. But of course, when I was little, that was in the country. And went to Girard Middle School, and the year my 8th grade year is the year that Northview opened up, or getting ready to open up. So we went from a middle school, a junior high school to a middle school that year. So in my 8th grade year, we had 9th graders at Girard. And then the next year, I was a 9th grader at Northview. So we were the first class, to go the first 4 years at Northview.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I know you had lots of classmates and teammates who came over from Girard over to Northview. But what about from a coach's standpoint? Did any of the coaches from Girard also end up coaching at Northview during the time you were there?
Yeah, Coach Hicks was at Northview. Was at Girard. So Coach Hicks was one that came from Girard to Northview.
And we had, as the years went on, Coach Mike Ferris and Coach Singletary, both. I don't know if they were Northview employees. I know they were Girard employees and coaches, but they also came over. And I know there's many others. They're just not coming to mind. But during my time, those two coaches spent a lot of time over at Northview, probably as much time as any of the other coaches themselves.
Yeah.
I want to welcome Chris Smith. And Shane, you're right. I've been waiting for this discussion as well. Shane Cobb gives you a shout out. So Brent, let's talk a little bit about middle school. Who were some of your classmates, teammates, and what sports did you play at Girard?
My 8th grade year, I didn't play football. My 7th grade year, I did, but didn't my 8th grade year. And I honestly, I don't really even remember why. It just didn't happen. But when I moved to Northview in the 9th grade, I played. We had a bunch of these same guys that I was at Houston Academy 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. Then 7th grade went to Girard. So at Northview, I was. At Houston Academy, I was there with David Alford and let me see, Jeff Farmer, and who else was there? Gosh, I can't remember. But had some of those guys from Houston Academy that stayed, and then the next year, came to Northview. But I went and spent 1 year at Girard. So I was only at Girard 1 year. Was my 7th grade year.
Okay. And then coming over to 9th grade, when did you first meet Coach Parrish or any of the coaches, and they start convincing you or telling you, not asking you, but I'm sure it was their way of telling you you'd be playing football at Northview? Well,
again, yeah. Well, when I was, in the 7th grade at Girard, I played football, and in the 8th grade, I didn't. And I don't know why I didn't, but I didn't go out. But there was never a question. I wanted to play in high school, so my first day on at Northview, I was going to play football. That was never an issue, never a question. I always knew I was going to play. Just for some reason, took a year off in the 8th grade. But played. Gosh, it's funny looking at when I was going through the pictures that you were asking. I went through some older ones from Pee Wee, and a lot of these same guys that are watching right now were on my Pee Wee football team and things like that. Pictures of us, where we played together for years and years and years.
Now, which ward? Where did you play your rec sports?
Played at
Were you at Doug too?
Doug 2, yeah, played at Doug 2. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember the year that Ward 4, which is Westgate, I'm not sure what year they started. It was a couple of years before I was age eligible because my first couple of years were also at Doug 2, maybe up through when I was, I guess maybe about 10. I can't remember, but I don't think they had opened up Westgate just then. Well, Brent, what about, were other sports always part of your picture, or were you just a football guy growing up?
I played baseball, but when when I got to I played baseball growing up forever. Loved baseball. Baseball was a lot of fun. When I was in the ninth grade, went out for football, played ninth grade football in the spring. Went and talked with the baseball coach about playing baseball, and he basically said, "No, you're a football player. You need to play football." So I didn't play baseball anymore. I was told I was playing football. So
Wow.
choice. So, but it was I never did not play baseball in high school. Looking back on it now, wish I had. But it did allow me to concentrate a little more. On football.
When did you hit your growth spurt?
I will tell you this, and this is a funny story. It's true. In the ninth grade, I was a decent football player. I thought, wasn't great, but a decent football player. When I was a sophomore, I had to have been one of the worst players on the whole football team. I was one of those guys that, I remember you remember the really bad things and really good things. Well, this is one thing I remember. When I was a sophomore, we played Carroll High School and beat them to death. I was the only person on the football team that didn't get in to play that night.
Oh.
So my sophomore year, I was not much of a football player. Now, between my sophomore and junior year, I grew up. And so, I had a good junior year, and that's where I grew up between my sophomore and junior year. And then, between my junior year and senior year, grew more. But now I got big in college. I tried my whole life to get big, and about my sophomore year in college, it happened. And after I graduated from college, it happened again.
It happens to, our vertical ends up going horizontal. That's just what
Yeah, but between my sophomore and junior year, we worked out hard with weights, and I grew, and a bunch of us did. And we had to, and that was one thing about that team, that group of seniors that year. And we had a group of guys that were really, we were family, and we loved each other, and we worked hard, and we caused each other to work hard. And we started that, my junior year, we started really coming together as a group. About senior year, there was nobody. I'm telling you, you could have taken all the seniors on that team, and I think every one of them would have died for each other. That was the kind of camaraderie we had by our senior year. So we grew up, and it wasn't just me. I would say most people. Larry Roberts is a great example. Gosh, he was sorry as he could be in the 10th grade, and ended up being probably the best athlete that Northview's ever put out. So, he grew up in junior year too. I think right in there, we've been beaten up by enough older people that we finally decided to kind of get strong and grow up.
Well, Brent, let's see. We got more folks rolling in. Chris Lee says to tell you hello. Autumn Baggett Toussaint is here with us. Cam Cobb, Caroline Hanahan Glover, Hunter Parrish, whole bunch of folks are in here, and we're talking, of course, with Brent Gilbert. Brent, let's take it to ninth grade football. Who were your coaches for ninth grade, if you remember?
Coach Hicks was I don't remember who else, but Coach Hicks was coaching ninth grade, and I had you remember, I remember one game in the ninth grade year, only one game. And it's the Enterprise game. And I'm going to tell you why I remember it. I told you remember the worst things and the best things.
Yeah.
I single-handedly in the ninth grade lost the Enterprise game.
All right, you have to elaborate.
Single-handedly. We lost 21-17. And let me tell you, they scored 3 touchdowns. And all 3 touchdowns were on balls that I snapped over Charles Lane's head, who was the punter.
Oh, boy. Wow, that may be a record right there.
Oh, I'm going to tell you, I was quitting football. My daddy wouldn't let me quit. I wanted to quit football. That was probably the worst day of my life.
Wow. So what you're saying is
home from the Enterprise game, my ninth grade year from Enterprise.
Wow. Well, later on, I'm sure you were very thankful for the talents of Blake Binge and Mark Kingery and Joseph Johnson. So you didn't have to.
Yeah, it's Joseph's fault. Me and Joseph talked about this because he couldn't play his ninth grade year because he was at Houston Academy. So it's his fault, really, not mine. So Joseph, it's you.
Well, I'll give him a chance to for rebuttal if he'd like. And I want to say hey to Josh Cobb and Coach Randy Hicks who've just joined us. Brent, what do you remember about that ninth grade? Do you remember practicing down in the bowl? Do you remember where'd you play? Where did they have you playing?
I played offense then, a little bit and a little bit of defense. Played all over. I played center most of the ninth grade. I remember running Ozarks in practice. Did y'all run Ozarks, which is when you ran down the hill where the baseball field is and back up? We were like running, we called it run to Ozark and back. Yeah. Doing that. Remember grass drills. I tell you what, also I'll remember the ninth grader. I remember not being able to drink anything. I remember there was a mud puddle that would build up where the sprinkler systems were, and we'd hide around that mud puddle. We'd drink water out of that mud puddle.
Wow.
Water.
And how many times?
I remember about ninth grade.
How many times did you share that story with your sons and their careers in high school?
Oh, they don't believe it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, who were some of the standouts in ninth grade who really kind of got your attention, got the coach's attention, and really were able to show that they had some talent back in ninth grade from your class?
From my class, we didn't have any superstars. We had a bunch of people that were decent athletes. So it wasn't like, we had one tailback or one running back or, we had a bunch of people that were good athletes or decent athletes, and we were a decent ninth grade team. We were, I don't remember what our record was, but we were a decent ninth grade team. But man, there's not anybody that I can say that guy was a stud. Now, when you go to like our senior year, I can point some of those out, but it's hard to look at that ninth grade year and remember, I remember Scott Patterson was a man in the ninth grade. I mean, he was tough. I mean, he of course he was tough when he was a senior too. But I do remember that. Gosh, yeah. I mean,
do you recall were any of the ninth graders? Did any of them during the course of the season move up to get to play JV or varsity ball?
I don't remember.
The reason why I asked, Brent, is it was so rare back then.
Yeah.
My ninth grade team, nobody moved up or got a chance to play. Now, granted, for example, on offense, you had Woo Woo and Doug Jones in the backfield. It's not like you're going to replace those guys when you're in ninth grade. Anyway, what was David quarterbacking you guys, or was there a different quarterback?
Well, see, David in the ninth grade, David couldn't quarterback because he was coming from Houston Academy.
That's what I
and I may be wrong with that, but I don't think David played ninth grade year. I think 10th grade is when, JV is when David started playing. So in the 10th grade, I was playing center and got to snap the ball to him a bunch.
We got a little trash talk here, Brent. I got to share with you.
Okay, bring it on.
JJ, he has no response to the snapping issue, but he does have two questions. First of all, why do they call you BW?
Nobody but JJ calls me BW.
And ask you about the Gilbertist cult.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Between our junior and senior year, we really congealed as a group, as a family. And, during our workouts, we really push each other to work out really hard. And I remember that winter, my junior year, that winter workout, before spring training when you're seniors, officially seniors, I had an old jersey. It was an old, like a tearaway jersey that I'd been wearing with an undershirt that tore. And it probably hadn't been washed in 3 years. Well, I made a headband out of it. It had a red headband. It was a red or burgundy. It probably maroon. And it probably trying to look like, who knows. But anyway, so I did that and gave David Alford and Joseph Johnson and Brad Kennington, some of those guys, gave them one too. And before you know it, they decided we're all going to be in a cult. It's going to be called the Gilbertist. So by the end of spring training, we had just about every senior on the team wearing a piece of that T-shirt and the bandana. Being in the group, they were my legions out there.
You know what, I'm sure you guys figured it out later on, maybe not as 18, 17-year-old, 18-year-old guys, but you were really building a camaraderie, a team spirit, a real close-knit group that later, and I know everybody who follows our program or been involved in the program know that y'all's team, the 81 state team, your senior year was the greatest team in the school's history. Statistically, there's no doubt. You went 13-1, probably shouldn't have lost that one game. And it has to be attributed largely to coaching and how they molded you guys, but you guys took it the next step, in my opinion. By doing that, while that's a fun memory, only leaders on a team who were able to get all the other seniors together and then the younger guys follow that. I mean, that was brilliant. You may not have realized what you were doing, but you were creating such camaraderie, such brotherhood.
Creating a cult.
That's right. And tell me that wasn't just such brotherhood that even today, how many of these guys from your senior year, your class, are here watching and sharing memories like this? That's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, one thing, about that team, and that's what this is about. This is about, I'm here talking, but this is about the 81 team, in playing football as long as I have and in playing at Auburn afterwards, I can tell you that there was something there that I've never experienced anywhere else. And we came together as a group and decided to win, and decided we were going to do whatever we had to do to win. There was no drama on the team. Everybody loved everybody, and everybody worked. We had some superstars there, and the superstars worked like everybody else. And everybody else made everybody work hard. So if somebody started, if somebody like in workouts, in winter workouts, before trying to get ready, trying to get big and all, if somebody wasn't trying, we'd get on to them. I mean, and it had an atmosphere of winning. And by the time we were playing that first game against Carroll High School, I think, who we opened up with my senior year, we had just made the decision that we were going to die for each other. And we did that every weekend. And it was just a great group of guys. And I'm gonna tell you, still all those guys. I mean, there are very few of those guys on that senior team that aren't still friends. That may not have contacted in a while, but still, a lot of great friends were built out of that 81 team.
And it's not just from an athleticism standpoint, because there were fantastic athletes in all of those grades, but not just in your grade. I mean, I had a running list, but I misplaced it, on how many guys from that 81 team, not just the seniors, but juniors and sophomores as well, went on to play in college. I think it was more than 30.
Oh, the bunch, yeah.
All different levels. But I don't mean to skip around, but your season had some similarities to our 85 season. And one of the similarities, in addition to the fine coaching staff, which was on both, one of your team leaders went down with a major injury early in the season. Take us to that game when David got hurt. You remember?
Yeah, we were playing in Georgia, playing a team we probably shouldn't have even been playing. And David went down right before halftime. And I remember thinking to myself, David is right now, at that time, I think he was the leading rusher in the state of Alabama. I mean, he had, in the Prattville game a week or two before, he had, I think he had 300 yards worth of rushing, close to it as a quarterback in one football game. It was crazy. And so, when that happened, it was like, gosh, what are we going to do? And it was heartbreaking. I mean, it was like, losing David was, if you asked, if you would have asked me what's the one player you can't lose, I'd have said David Alford. Anybody else is expendable but David. And Dickie Lillard came on and just did a phenomenal job. He took the reins and had to change the offense because Dickie couldn't run like David did, but it changed the nature of our offense, and it made it to where we played ball control and just won ball games, and and David got to cheer us on, and man, but it was so crazy when we lost him. It was one of those things like, what do we do now? What do we do now? And what we did is we came together. We loved on each other, came together, and decided we would do what we had to do. And I've got to give a lot of, I've got to give a big shout out to Dickie Lillard, who was a junior, and nobody thought he would be the player that he was, and he came on and did a great job. And who can win a state championship after their leading rusher and starting quarterback gets a career-ending injury, in the third game of the season? It's just you look at it and go, that's it, they can't win.
As a side note, for those of you who don't know, many of you do, David went on and has had a very successful orthopedic surgeon practice in Dothan, and has probably helped hundreds, if not thousands, of athletes get back into their sports. But going back to David as a senior quarterback, he's one of the top quarterbacks in the state, particularly running the type of offense that Coach Parrish had put into place. And he goes down, and here you have an untested junior, Dickie, who steps in and does not just an admirable job. He didn't just survive.
No, he did great.
He was thriving. And it really was a big tribute to how close your senior class was and the leadership that was there. And I'm not talking about just what was on the field, more importantly, what was off the field. And take us into the middle of that season, Brent, off the field, the vibe of the team. Tell me, what do you remember from that time period? Not the playoffs, but in the heart of the season, September, October, November, before you're really getting into the playoffs.
Well, in the heart of the season, we ended up losing a football game to Lanier in Montgomery that we should have never lost. And that really, that woke us up. I think after that game, we were a different team. I think we had gotten complacent to where we really thought we were good. We had beaten some good ball clubs, and then Lanier, who was an average team, they had some great athletes, but they were really, they were middle of our schedule, and we beat teams that were better than them. And we were up big at halftime. In the second half, we just shut down, and they scored on us and losing the ball game. And looking back on it, man, that was good for us. We needed it. Back then when you only had, you only got 4 divisions, 4A, you can't afford to lose one game. And so that was the one we needed to lose. And it woke us up, and it made us realize that, okay, now we can't lose a game. And we took that on that same feeling throughout the rest of the end of the season. It turned us into a one-game team, to where we felt like the next week, this is our only game, this is the only one that counts, the one we're playing right now. And we had that attitude after the Lanier game. Before it, we were looking at trying to win a state championship.
Yeah.
But that it's like, we're trying to win this week. This is all that matters. If we lose this week, nothing else matters, because we won't get in the playoffs. So it turned into a 1-week game every week, and we carried that on in the playoffs, and really, beat a couple of teams that were so daggone good, that if you really look at them, look at us, man, they were probably better than we were, but we beat them, and we came together and figured out a way to win, and that was what was great about that team and that club.
Well, Brent, let me refresh your memory just a little bit. You're spot on. The third game of the year was at Sidney Lanier. Now, historically, Sidney Lanier was a thorn in Northview's side. I don't think we beat them. I'd have to look at the records. I think they beat us more than we beat them historically. But it was the next game, is the Crisp County game, is the game David got hurt. That was a 35-20 win at Crisp County. After that game, no team scored more than 14 points on the defense the rest of the season. Guys, it was 0, 7, 13, 3, 6, 3, 14, 12, 7, and 6. That's how stingy that defense was the rest of the year. And you got half on offense. They didn't have to score a lot of points when the defense was so shut down.
And that's what I think, part of the things that made the team great. Our offense did what they had to do. They played ball control. We realized that if the offense can control the ball and control the clock and make first downs, then we're going to win ball games. And because by middle of the season, we figured out we had a pretty damn good defense, and we were able to do that to people. You know, we scored points. You know, gosh, we had a great Jonathan Parker that we had a great couple of defensive backs that intercepted balls and would run them back. We had several punts that were returned for touchdowns. So we had some athletes that could do that, that could put points on the board. So we had a scoring defense too. So that was one of the really great things about that offense. You know, losing when we lost David and then lost that game. You know, it made us come to the conclusion that, you know, as a defense, you know, not as a whole team, but as a defense that, you know, hey, if they don't score on us, we'll win. That was kind of our attitude for the rest of the year.
Now, Brent, take us to you. I want to back up for just a minute. Go to your junior year. What positions were you concentrating and mainly playing at that point?
Okay, between my sophomore and junior year, I got moved to defense. You know, and defensive player is what I should have been the whole time. And I got moved to nose guard and played nothing but nose guard. My junior year, I started at nose guard and played every game. I guess I played every snap my junior year. So had a really good junior year. Had grown, so I wasn't little, but I wasn't big. You know, I was probably 6'1", 200 pounds maybe, but I had pretty good feet. You know, and had a really good junior year. And here, you know, that team our junior year and my sophomore year, I mean, had some tremendous athletes on it, but they just didn't come together as a team. And that was, you know, that's one thing that I saw by the time the difference in our senior year. And, you know, my sophomore year, we had a tremendous team, had some phenomenal athletes, but they just didn't put together a team and didn't win. So, you know, it's just kind of bizarre how that happens. But, you know, my sophomore year played nose guard. My senior year, exclusively nose guard, you know, and got recruited as a nose guard and went to Auburn as a nose guard, and they converted me to an offensive lineman, back to an offensive lineman.
Well, take us into the defensive huddle your senior year. Who's calling the defensive plays in the huddle?
Scott Patterson, he was the man. So Scott was calling the plays. I wasn't smart enough to do that, so I listened to what he said and went to where he said. You know, we have been by middle of the season, we've been given a lot of leadway to call stunts, do that all on our own. So me and Scott would do that. We'd stun a bunch. You know, I tried to use my feet, not quick people. So, you know, we would do, you know, twists and you know, slants and all kind of stuff. So Scott and I did a bunch of that on our own. And you know, so by the end of the season, we were doing a lot of our own stuff. But Scott's the one, he was the one that called the plays in the huddle, made sure everybody got what they should. You know, Scott was a tremendous athlete, Scott Patterson, and was a great high school football player. Really one of those guys that, you know, he was, you know, 5'10", you know, 210 pounds, and probably ran a 4.9 40, but he was in on every tackle. You know, he just and had a head on his shoulders and made sure everybody was lined up right. And, you know, it worried me when he wasn't in the game.
And now I'm going to test your memory a little bit. Let's go over
Scary.
The defensive starting 11 that year.
Oh gosh, don't ask me to call out the names. I can't do it. You know, we had Bud Young, we had David, we had Carmichael Patton. There was me. It was David Hollowell. It was Joseph Johnson, Brad Kennington, Kite, John Kite, Kershaw Bird.
Well, you were calling out some names right now.
Yeah, let me see.
Ty Whaley in the backfield.
Pie Whaley, yeah, gosh, how did I forget Pie Whaley? Pie Whaley's the one that ran our punts back for touchdowns. He probably had four punts returned for touchdowns our senior year. And I know there's one or two more. I'm missing a linebacker and I'm missing a safety, I think.
They'll come to you in just a minute, but I want to.
Of course they will.
Did you ever have, being on the defense, did you ever have the occasions to be able to watch our offense during the games? Or were you guys too busy doing your defensive huddles in the sidelines with the coaches?
No, remember, you got to understand we were ball control. So the offense had the ball for a long time. We got to sit on the sideline a lot. We want to be on the sideline the whole game. We want to be 3 plays and out and not want the offense run 12 plays.
Yeah.
And our offense did that. We were 3 yards in a cloud of dust, and then we get 4 yards on that last play and keep on going. So, but yeah, we got to watch the offense a bunch, and that was. Yeah, and after coming up, we'd usually sit on the sideline. Coach Hicks would holler at us for a minute or two about something stupid that we did, and then after that, we'd stand there and cheer our offense on, and just want them to grind and grind and grind.
Well, for obvious reasons, Larry Roberts got lots of publicity. He stood out. He was just a phenomenal athlete. Some would say he was a bit of a freak of nature for that time period. What he could do. Not only on the football field, but on the basketball court.
Yeah, he was a beast.
But I want to talk about what was it like going up against him in practice? How much of a treat was it to watch him in the games? What kind of a teammate was he during those years?
Well, for some reason, everybody thought it was fun for me to go against each other. So we went against each other all the time, even though he was playing tight end and I was playing nose guard. But
lucky you
against Larry, it seemed like. And it was always a good fight. Larry was so strong and so long and long arms, just long and lanky and had good feet. He had he was in the wrong position. He ended up, of course, he played tight end because he wanted to catch the ball, but really he needed to be a defensive end. I mean, that's where he ended up being a defensive tackle at Alabama and in the pros. But and he was just his senior year he was just big and tall and strong and fast. I mean, that's it. What was so good about him? He was big, tall, strong, and fast. I mean, he had it all. He's 6'5", was running a 4.6 40 at 150 pounds, which was, back then that was pretty strong.
Not to mention kicking 50-yard field goals too.
Yeah. He put a square toe boot on it.
That's right. I don't know if his 50-yarder ended up being the school's longest in history. I don't know that, but I know for many, many years.
It was, yeah.
Yeah, Brent, we got a whole bunch of more folks who've got some shout outs for you. So I want to mention them to you. Let's see. Coach Hicks says you were the only player who mooned the PE class at Northview.
He beat my butt for that too.
I didn't realize this was turning out to be a roast Brent Gilbert night. I would have told you if I'd have known.
I got 3 licks for that, hardest licks of my life, and the whole football team was there, and then made me pull my britches down. He gave me licks on my skin.
Oh boy. All right, now JJ has an awesome compliment. Make no mistake about it. Although you're very humble and never sought attention, Brent was one of the superstars on that team. And I second that, and many others third and fourth that. Shane Cobb agrees. Coach Hicks amens that. Coach Andrews says great leader and player. Now we move on a little bit. Charles Bronson says that Dickey was always prepared. Tara Wade Estes says hello. Kevin Jackson says what's up. Coach Andrews, Dickey took reps with the first team every practice, even before David got hurt. He was very coachable.
Yeah.
Let's see. And just a few more shout outs like that. Well, thank you guys, man, showing Brent some big time love.
Yeah. Give me some love.
Well, Brent, let's head into the playoffs. Your senior year. None of those games were runaway games. All those games were close, except maybe the Foley game, but that may have been during the season. I don't remember if that was.
No, that was the second playoff game. The first playoff game was Fairhope, and that was a tremendous football game. Fairhope had a quarterback that you may remember. His name was Pat Washington. Washington ended up going to Auburn and played with me at Auburn. So, we went up early in that game, and within a fight for our lives, Pat Washington in the fourth quarter did like you did at that league game your senior year. He got on fire and came back, and with seconds left on the clock, threw an interception in our end zone to lose the ball game. So, and the funny thing is me and Pat Washington became real good friends at Auburn, and we talked about that game. With a bunch of guys at Auburn that I played against, it's fun when you beat them to talk about the game, and they don't like to talk, but you do. So I talked about that game, and he said, man, I remember the very first play of the game He said, I was running and got chased out of the pocket, was running toward our sideline, and I got mashed by two people, by a defensive end and somebody else. And it said, I thought my arm was broke. And I went, Pat, that was me and Bud Young. We hit you on the sideline. And I remember when I hit you thinking, ooh, that hurt. I could see it in his eye. They hit him right up under the chin and Bud on the side. And I looked at him, I could see in his eye, he had to look like, oh, you know. And he said, Brent, I played hurt the entire game after that. I said, well, I knew it hurt. It looked like it hurt to me when we hit you. But he was a monster. He came back, and in the fourth quarter, like I said, I think it was Pi Whaley intercepted the ball in the end zone with about a minute left to win the ball.
It was
go up and win. So that was a tremendous game, and they were a very good team.
Pat, that was a Murphy game, not Fairhope. It was Murphy.
Yeah, you're right, Murphy. I get Murphy and Fairhope mixed up.
It's funny that you mentioned that you and Pat becoming teammates and laughing about it later on. Kevin Collins, my year lineman, of course, went to Auburn, and he ended up rooming with Anthony Brown from Robert E. Lee, who was on the Lee team that we ended up beating in the playoffs. And Kevin was able to rub it in with him all those years later on. So that's funny. That's very funny. So you go into the playoffs, and eventually you take care of business the first 4 weeks. Not without some close calls, because all those teams were very tough.
Well, the best team that we played was Jeff Davis in the semifinal. That's really when we won the championship. They were favored, and they were good at every position. They had a running back named Curtis Stewart that I also played with at Auburn. It was a phenomenal running back. And they were just big and strong, and they had a quarterback. Gosh, I can't remember his name, but he ended up playing at Troy. He started at Troy for about 4 years.
If you guys remember, put his name in the comments.
Yeah, gosh, I can't remember his name, and he ended up coaching too. He's a coach, high school football coach for years. I'm sure he's still coaching somewhere. But that was a great football team, and we won that team with about a 40-yard field goal at the end of the game. It was 7-7, and we had the football and kicked the field goal to win it with no time on the clock.
Well, watch what you're saying now. Your quarterback, David Offer, just joined our conversation. So, Brent, be
I won't talk about him anymore.
Ingrid says it was Mike Turk.
That's right. Yeah. Yep.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. I knew somebody would remember.
Yeah, and you know how in games like that, and you everybody that plays, you have 2 or 3 plays that you really remember. There's one play I remember that was the play right before halftime. I had Mike Kirk sacked. I mean, he was dead in the water, and he took one step forward and juked me and threw a touchdown pass for about 50 yards. And so that made it tied 7-7 at halftime. And it was the last play of the half. And so I still kick myself for letting him duck under me on that play.
Well,
he was quick and fat, man. He was a tremendous athlete. Yeah, absolutely.
Do you remember, you guys win the semifinals, you're going to the state finals, you're going to be playing Carver up at Legion Field. Had you ever visited in Birmingham prior to that? Had you ever been to Legion Field before then?
I'd been to several Auburn, Alabama games over the years. So I'd been to Legion Field as a spectator, never as a football player. So it was a big stage, and you know that. I mean, you're used to playing, in small stages, and all of a sudden you get there and it is a big stage. And it was the first time we'd ever played on AstroTurf, so that was a big different thing for us. And it was just, man, it was exciting. I mean, it was a defensive game, and we won 7-6, and one of those games that I think we could have played them for 10 years and they'd have never scored on us. They scored they ran a punt back for a touchdown. That's how they scored. But I don't know how many first downs they had in that game, but it couldn't have been more than just a couple. We really held them down on defense, but they had a great defense too.
They did.
So the difference was they couldn't kick an extra point.
David says, tell us about the spy in the press box.
The what?
David Alford says, tell us about the spy in the press box.
The spy in the press box?
Does that ring a bell? David, you're going to have to elaborate. You're going to have to join me on a conversation one of these Wednesday nights and tell us this story. And maybe we'll come back to you. But Brent, let me ask you before.
David was probably the spy in the press box. If
I was going to say, was he the spy? Probably so. Brent, tell us about that Tuesday coming up to Legion Field and doing the walkthrough. Do you remember that trip that day?
Yeah, I do. I remember going up and we I remember getting on the field and trying to figure out what kind of shoes we were going to wear. We brought several different pair of shoes, just none of us really knew, if we were going to wear cleats or we were going to wear tennis shoes or what. And I remember getting on that field and going, this is like playing on the carpet at the house. It's going to be horrible. So the big thing I remember was the turf and how how it was just so different and how the characteristics were different than what we were used to. I remember that, and I remember we really in that game, I don't think anybody on our team questioned whether we were going to win or not. Really, I was worried to death about the Jeff Davis game. After we beat Jeff Davis, I was like, we just have to go make things happen. We just have to go win this ball game to win the state. But it wasn't like it wasn't like playing Jeff Davis. We really felt like that they were the best team that we were going to play, and we were right. I think that that Carver had some great athletes, had a great defense. We had 1 or 2 touchdowns called back in that game on penalties. But the atmosphere was just different for that game. I think because Jeff Davis was so good, and Jeff Davis was the team that everybody thought was going to win it all. So after we beat them, we for the first time, I think the first time in the playoff, were favored, and went into that game, really in a business-like sense. Just let's get this done, get it over, then we'll worry about excitement after it's over.
Well, I can remember when we did our Tuesday walkthrough, I had been to Legion Field to see Alabama and Auburn and other games. In fact, I had been there the week before our state championship game was when Van Tiffen kicked his famous long field goal, and I was at that game. But
I was at that game too.
I was in the stands.
I was on the sideline. It was horrible.
But Brent, I remember walking onto the turf and it feeling not as hard as the concrete we had just walked off of.
But just about.
Pulling up a corner of it, and it was only, I don't know, ½ thick, maybe an inch thick, thinking, you're right, this is just like playing in my den.
Yeah.
And what did you end up wearing?
I had some high top tennis shoes. So I wore like basketball tennis shoes.
Yeah. Yep, a lot of
our cleats couldn't track with our cleats. And I remember and we all had 2 or 3 different pairs of shoes trying to figure out what to wear. And I wore high top tennis shoes.
Yeah, the cleats were really of no use whatsoever. We had a few people had borrowed, I guess, some of the original turf shoes, but they were just so different than the feel of your own tennis shoes at the time. But Brent, take us to that game. Take us to some of your memories either during the game or after. What were some things that really have been just something I've always held with you?
Well, I remember in that game, they really didn't, of course, I'm on the defensive side, and they really didn't have an offense that could produce points. The only way they were going to score is if somebody scrambled and just got loose and got lucky. They had a couple of guys that could really run, but they really didn't have a good offense. I mean, they had some athletes. Yeah. They scored a lot of their, I think, like I said, they scored against us on a punt return. And if I remember right, I think near the end of the game, we actually went for it a couple of times on 4 times. We didn't want to punt to them. Mm-hmm. One of those type of things, they're scared to death if you punted to them because that they could get out in the open, and they had an athlete or two that could really run. I remember thinking about how fast the turf made everybody. It made everybody fast. I remember thinking that, being out there and getting on all fours and coming off the ball and thinking about how fast I felt like I was, didn't realize everybody else was doing the same thing. The game, that game, a whole thing just seemed like it was something we've got to get through. I mean, it was almost to the point where we've just got to get through this thing. It wasn't, it wasn't like some of the other games we had all the excitement. It was more like a job to me, at least to me, it seemed that way. It was like, hey, got to do this. It's a job. Let's get it done. And then after that, we'll whoop it up and celebrate. And I'll tell you what, at the end of that ball game, when that clock ticked down to 0-0, there's very few times in my life that I've experienced the joy that I had on at that particular time. It was a feeling of all those hours, all those footsteps, all those sprints, all that weightlifting, all that extra eating, trying to put on weight, where it's all worth it because of this right here. And it's a shame that so few people, I mean, you think about it, so few people get to experience something like that, especially in a big stage like 6A or when we were there 4A football. There's only one team in the state of Alabama a year, and so it's a tremendous feeling, and the guys that played with us, I'm sure that they had different experiences. They may have seen it different than me, but to me, man, it was just when we finally finished up, when that clock ticked, all those emotions came out, and I remember crying on the field, and before then I wasn't emotional at all. During the game, I didn't get excited. I mean, I've been, after the game, I was excited, hitting everybody on the head, but everybody, I really wasn't like that at that game. But I remember it wasn't that exciting. But when that clock ended, it was all over. It kind of hit what we had done, and I remember being in the locker room after the game, and we had a graduate assistant, a coach, and I cannot remember his name, but he had one of these beards that was like this big, and he said, if we win the game, I'm going to shave a beard, and after, in the locker room we shaved him. So I do remember that. Somebody may can tell who that coach was. I don't remember his name, but I think he was a graduate assistant or something like that. But he may have been, I remember we shaved him.
Well, if you guys remember his name, throw it in the comments section. That's awesome. I'd never heard that story. Mark says it was pretty anticlimactic compared to other games in the playoffs.
Yeah, like I said, honestly, when we won the Jeff Davis game, to me that was the state championship. That was because that was the game that we couldn't win. And when we won that, we all knew we were going to beat Carver. Now the game wasn't near as close as 7-6. But yeah, it seemed like it was anticlimactic because Jeff Davis was so good.
JJ says Coach McCaskey was his name.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And Bruce Johnson, when I had him on our program a few months ago, he describes the last play that Pye intercepted from his perspective, being in the defensive backfield, and just I wanted to see if there was a memory from your perspective when that last pass was gone. Were you anywhere near the quarterback? Did you?
What game are you talking about?
This is the Carver game.
Carver game. Yeah. I chased him around all night and never caught him. So I can tell you that I remember not having a lot of tackles in that game, which upset me because I wanted to have more tackles than anybody else. But I remember chasing that sucker around and couldn't ever catch him. So I was running him around. I promise you, I was following him with the ball. And I remember just chasing him. I chased him all over the place. And I'm not the only one that didn't catch him. He outrun a bunch of us, but he threw the ball all over the field. But the quarterback had some legs. We didn't let him get loose, but man, we just couldn't catch him. He'd run around the backfield and throw the ball, and wasn't real successful with it. But I didn't have it a whole lot.
You harassed him the whole night. Coach Andrews says he was a trainer. He was on the medical staff.
Yeah, that's right. Right.
That's awesome. Well, by this point in your high school, in your senior year, were you being recruited by schools? Were you in touch with schools?
Yeah, I started getting recruited first part of my senior year. I had some good numbers my junior year, and I think that's what kind of threw it over, where I started getting recruited. And, Larry Roberts was if you would call now a 5-star that everybody wanted, I would have been considered a 1-star. I'm the kind of guy that I got.
And nobody believe in that, Brent. Stop it. Stop it right now. We're going to give you a 4.5 star. You stop it off this mindset.
I got recruited by Florida State pretty heavily, and got recruited by Troy, and got recruited by Auburn, and got recruited by Tennessee pretty heavily. Georgia didn't really recruit me, which my dad went to Georgia, so that kind of hurt my feelings because I don't know that I'd gone there, but I felt like they should have recruited me, and didn't get recruited at all by Alabama. So my dad actually played with Coach Dye at Georgia. So that kind of gave me an in at Auburn, and kind of was one of the main reasons why I ended up going there. So it was, I had some choices, but really Auburn made sense because the coaching staff knew my family, and my sister was up there, and I had already become an Auburn fan. I grew up an Alabama fan, but my sister went to Auburn and started going up there, and kind of got converted probably by my sophomore year. I was starting to like Auburn.
I gotcha. David Mims says to tell you hello. He just joined us. Now, I know Charles Bronson ended up walking on at Auburn. Were there any other guys already on the team or who joined while you were there at Auburn? And Kevin Collins, my class, you would have either been a senior or graduating when Kevin Collins came in.
Yeah, Kevin Collins, I think he was a freshman my senior year, or he may have been recruited my senior year. I don't really remember. I honestly think that when I was a senior, he was getting recruited and coming up there, because I remember seeing him up there, but I don't know if he was a freshman and I was a senior, or if he was coming up there because he was being recruited.
Fall of 86 would have been his freshman first season.
Okay, so he was a freshman my senior year then, because that was my senior year. Because I graduated in 87, 86 was my last football year.
What about other Wiregrass guys from Dothan, Carroll, or Enterprise?
Yeah, we had, played with Alan Evans from Enterprise, and it's funny. Alan was probably the highest recruited running back in the nation, if not the highest, one of the highest, and never really did anything at Auburn. Got hurt and ended up transferring, but I played with him. A couple of guys, the Thompson boys from Enterprise, I played with them, and they're both great athletes, great football players.
Yeah.
We had a couple of guys from Dothan High School. We had another lineman from Dothan High School, and I cannot remember his name that played. I think I can't remember his name, but
I knew that Auburn
wasn't a lot.
I knew Auburn recruited well in the Wiregrass, probably more so than Alabama did at that time. So I was just curious if you had other teammates. But I do want to take you to a time that I guess maybe I had forgotten about or didn't realize. But in my senior year, in the fall of 85, the season of 85, you came over from Auburn on an off week to the Robert E. Lee playoff game, and you ended up speaking with us. So tell us about that memory from that night.
Yeah, that and Charles will probably remember this too. He was with us, I think. We I don't know if it was an off week or what, but we got a night off, and which we didn't get very many of those. And I remember, Northview was playing in Montgomery, so we got in the car and drove to Montgomery, and it was about 3 or 4 of us, and I don't remember what guys were with me. I remember Charles was, but we watched the game at halftime. Y'all were getting beat up, if I remember right, at halftime, and we decided to go down and just say hey to Coach Parrish or whatever. And we went in the locker room, and it seemed like I remember Coach said, "Do you want to talk to him?" I'm like, I guess. So I remember being down there with y'all, and man, there was a bunch of long, sad faces in there, and us talking to y'all, and didn't shoot. Fourth quarter, you kind of got on fire, and had a wide receiver that did also, and y'all came back and beat them, and that was a lot of fun watching y'all come back and win that football game. But that's one of those things that we just got lucky, got a free night, got to go see a Northview game, which I think that's probably the only one I got to see during my whole 5 years at Auburn.
Well, it's, when you're playing for a D1 SEC school, you don't get many off nights back then. Now they've got the hours regulations and things like that, and athletes are treated differently. But back in those days, it was a rare night to get away. But I remember, and Chris Lee remembers that you coming and speaking with us that evening. What always is fun for me, and maybe you've heard this from your times at Northview, is that when you find out some of the former players came and saw you play, and you might not have even have known they were there that night, but then they give you a little shout out or a little, let you know that they were there and making them proud. And that's what, Brendan, I meant to say this earlier, with you guys winning the 81 state championship, the bar before your senior year, the bar was already starting to be set by Coach Parrish and those other teams because they kept winning and they made the playoffs, and then you guys came along. But then you set the bar so very high, and it was always the gold standard that the rest of the teams, frankly, for the next 30 plus years, tried to always reach. And as magical as my senior year was, we had those 5 overtimes, all that craziness. Our team was not the team that you had. You guys were so dominant and so just in control of your games. It was such a different experience for you guys, but it always set the bar so very high. And I know I've never thanked you, but this is my way of thanking you for doing what you guys did, which came very natural, just being winners and being brothers.
Well, I appreciate that. And you know, the thing about the Northview team, the 81 team that really sticks in my mind, we had a couple of really good players, but we had a bunch of good players. We had a bunch of guys that were athletes that could play ball and that worked really hard. And that was the thing that I think that made us unique, was that we really didn't have any weak spots. I mean, we were there wasn't any place that we were bad. You know, we didn't really have, you know, holes in the armor. You know, we weren't going to score a bunch of points. We weren't going to let other people score a bunch of points either. I just think that honestly, that year we came together as a group of kids and fell in love with each other and decided to do something and made it happen. And we had the athletes to do it, but it wasn't like, you know, we didn't have a Bo Jackson, you know, anything like that, but we had the athletes to do it. And Dickey's a great example of that, you know, coming behind David Alford, who David Alford is probably the best athlete that's ever, one of the best athletes that's ever been at Northview High School. Till he got hurt, and now he can't even hardly walk. But anyway, he's a great athlete, and to have somebody who was that dominant get hurt, and then somebody comes behind him and wins the state championship is just phenomenal, and it puts a lot of emphasis on how well Dickey did prepared and how well the coaches prepared him, but also how the team gathered around him and how he had so many weapons and so many people to help him be successful. And that was what was cool about this team. I really think that, you know, some teams win state championships because they've got superstars on the team that nobody can stop. Our team wasn't like that. We had a team with a handful of really good athletes and a bunch of good athletes. And they all played hard, they all played together, and they all wanted each other to win. It was unselfish. And that's what I remember about that team. And that's the only time I ever played for a team that was like that, where it wasn't anybody, you know, just unselfish love trying to win as a group. And that's the way that 81 team was.
You know, it's a tribute to Coach Parrish and the coaching staff who worked with him and the atmosphere that he cultivated for all those years. And
Absolutely.
Brent, we're getting close to the end of our conversation, and I've had so much fun. I really appreciate you taking us down memory lane a little bit, but I can't let you get out of here without talking about blocking for Bo Jackson and that talented team back then. Well, you played with Larry Roberts, probably one of Northview's greatest products, athletes-wise. You got to play with maybe, with no offense to Herschel Walker and his fans, maybe the greatest running back in SEC history, if not the greatest athlete in in the country.
You know, being at Auburn, I was really blessed to be around certain superstars that you didn't realize that. You know, I was sweet mate with Charles Barkley one year. Didn't think anything of it, you know. And then, you know, Bo Jackson, who is, you know, honestly probably one of the greatest athletes ever lived. You know, just you know, it's crazy. And then Brent Fullwood, who you know, I played a lot more with Brent Fullwood. You know, me and Bo Jackson were the same age. I played in the high school all-star game together, but I was redshirted. So my junior year, I lettered but didn't play a whole lot. But senior year, played a lot and lettered, and so most of my playing was with Brent Fullwood. But Bo, man, I tell you what, it just, the things he could do is just credit. I'm gonna tell you a Bo Jackson story. This is a off the football field story, and I've told a bunch of people this. We talked about Pat Washington earlier, and we had a game room at Auburn. In this game room, me and Pat Washington were playing foosball. Me and Pat Washington playing foosball, doing the foosball thing. Bo Jackson was playing pool at the big, you know, full-size pool table, which was right across from where we were. Now, at the corner of my eye, I see Bo Jackson hit the cue ball, and it bounces over and goes in onto the other side of the table. And then out of the corner of my eye, I see him take one step toward the pool table and bunny hop over it, land on the other side and hit the cue ball again. And I stopped playing football. I looked at Pat Washington. I said, Pat, did Bo Jackson just jump over the pool table? And Pat went, nope, humans can't do that. But just, just horsing around, he took one step, bellied up to it, and bunny hopped over a pool table. He didn't think anything of it. I mean, it just, that's the kind of athlete he was.
Like the rest of us just walking across the room, no big deal.
Yeah, he just didn't walk around the table, so he just hopped over it.
Wow. Well, Brent, thank you so much for this awesome trip down memory lane tonight. Some great stories from real perspective. You've always been a very humble person, someone who has not sought the limelight ever, and very quick to give compliments. But my compliment to you for just being who you were on and off the field all these years. And I speak for those watching and for many others who aren't watching but may watch later on. So just thank you for being who you've been and what your importance has been for the Northview program.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Well, guys, before I forget, I have been asked, who is this picture of? This is Teddy Yost from the early 90s. He was a running back. I don't remember Teddy's senior year, but it was just, I thought it was a cool picture and just a different backdrop. So I wanted to share that this evening. As we've done, 24, 25, 26 weeks now, we keep having our conversations with Cougars. And we've got a special player and coach who had the experience of being at both schools, meaning Northview High School as a coach, and he played at Dothan High back in the day, Janaski Fleming. Everybody knows Coach Fleming, and we're going to get into a great conversation with him next week, and I'm looking forward to talking with him. As I say every week, guys, please use your common sense. Be patient during this pandemic, and even if you don't like wearing a mask for yourself, please consider wearing it for others. We're going to get through this eventually, but just keep doing what you're doing. And guys, have another great week. Be well.